Welcome, game dev adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today we're talking with Jane Robinson about remote play, managing creativity and collaboration from home.
Indie Game Lunch Hour.
In our live magical podcast, we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. This is a mostly unedited recording of a weekly event we host on our Discord every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, so feel free to come by and join us for the next one. Ask your own questions live. I am your host, as always, Willem Delventhal, the headmaster here at the Indie Game Academy and the self-proclaimed Wizard of Joy. And joining me today is Jane Robinson. Jane is the brand manager at Super Evil Megacorp and is here to tell us about working remotely. Jane, welcome. What are you having for lunch today?
So as you know, I'm in England, so I'm actually going to have dinner after this, and I'm going to have some dim sum.
Oh, dim sum. That's a great choice.
Yeah, fancy.
Wow. Nobody ever says that. It's always like, I'm going to have a turkey sandwich or just coffee.
Yeah, I've been to the Asian supermarket. I bought a lot of frozen dim sum. I'm happy.
Wow. Life is good. Can't complain.
No.
Dim sum is
choice.
It. Yeah, peak, pinnacle. Well, welcome to the show, Jane. It's a pleasure to have you on. I think we talked about having you on maybe months ago at this point, so it's great to actually have you on and get to talk with you. I get to you're one of those people that I sort of sort of digitally know because I just see you posting to LinkedIn all the time. Yep. And so it's great to actually chat. Before anything else, I'd love to start with the titular question of this show, which is, Jane, could you tell us your origin story, how you got to where you are today and where you actually are?
Sure. So I've been doing marketing for about 13 years, and I kind of stumbled into it because back in the day, I did a cinema and photography degree at university/college, as you Americans call it, thinking that I was going to be a movie director, which in hindsight was a delusional thought.
I had a phase like that too.
So a couple of years ago when I started working for a creative agency that specialised in games, and now I am 1 month into my first in-house games job as brand manager at Super Evil Megacorp, and it's very exciting because it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time and didn't really know if it was possible, but very pleased that it is possible. And also the company that I'm working for is also 100% remote, which is my preference. So that is a short version, but if you want me to go into more detail, you let me know.
That sounds good. We've just we had a problem with Craig, which is who we use to record audio.
Up.
Yes, and he or they or I don't know, our wonderful AI friend Craig has joined the chat. I'm sure I have other questions, but I think let's sort of dive into pieces of it. This is your first in-house job in the game industry, is what you said?
Yes.
Amazing. So how does it, give us a little bit of a perspective. What was it like landing that first job?
Honestly, I cried with joy when I found out. So I had the interview quite a long time ago, and I got on really well with the people that I spoke to, and I knew that it was going to be working on Teenage Ninja Mutant Turtles Splintered Fate. And obviously, as a child of the 80s, I grew up on Ninja Turtles. I love animated content anyway. So inside, I was just bubbling with excitement, oh my God, this is so cool. Oh my God, I hope I get it. But obviously, because I was made redundant from my last job, I was obviously looking at other options as well. And I had a few other things in the pipelines. I had a few freelance gigs. And then they didn't contact me for ages. So I was like, okay, whatever. They've probably found someone who has more experience than me, more relevant, whatever. And then surprise, I got the job. It was just really satisfying. And obviously there's a lot of people who have already worked in-house who were looking. So I would just assumed that they would choose someone who had already worked in-house.
Mm-hmm.
But I think because I'd worked in agency backgrounds, which is a lot of multitasking, a lot of relationship management, it really suited this role because the two games we're working on are working with someone else's IP. kind of feels more like an agency because you are having to manage processes with, in our case, Netflix and Paramount and Zack Snyder, which is ridiculous to say. So having that like agency background is actually really helpful here. It's not as straightforward as just like someone who's worked at any game studio. Like it's more complicated.
That's incredibly exciting. The whole waiting absolutely months for the role seems to just kind of be a thing here.
Yep.
Both of my last two jobs, I think the hiring process was 3 months, maybe even a little longer. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the hiring manager just gone to Gamescom and got busy, so like fair enough. But yeah, I'm super stoked, and I'm only a month in, but it's going so well.
Amazing. That's so exciting. Can you give us a little perspective then? How did you actually land the opportunity? Did you just cold apply? Was there a little bit more to it than that?
So as you've mentioned already, I am a LinkedIn person. Like I'm on there a lot, and
an influencer, if you will.
Am I?
I think so. I think you count.
So yeah, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and at my previous job, I did a lot of business development, so like looking for opportunities for the agency to work with game studios. So it's always mattered to me to be present there. And then as soon as I found out I was going to be made redundant, obviously went 100% at LinkedIn, lurked there all the time, engaged with the right people, and I actually found the opportunity because the hiring manager posted on LinkedIn. I don't even think we were connected at this point. It was one of those situations where like someone I know had like liked the post and then it popped up in my feed. So when I saw it, I was already familiar with the company because the agency I'd worked for had made their website. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. Let me go and DM him and see what it is that he needs. And he sent me the job description. I was like, yep, tick, tick, tick. I can do all of those things. Let's have a chat. And yeah, we had a chat, waited for ages, got the job. So yeah, it was not through a traditional job application, which is something that's happened to me quite a lot. Like if people are like constantly applying for jobs in a normal way, a traditional sense, like through a website or LinkedIn jobs, like that isn't the only route. Like there is other ways that you can find opportunities. So like don't restrict yourself to like one way. Like it is good just to network and to be present in the right places so that you can see the opportunities when they come up.
Yeah, it's already a really good piece of advice. I think this is something that we hear time and time again on this show. It's one of the reasons I love running this show, because I get to talk with people like you and hear how it actually happened and worked for them. The cold application does happen. We definitely do hear of those. Amir Satvat recently changed his estimates. You've got about an 8% chance of landing a job in games with a cold application in a year, which is like wild still, but it's actually higher than it used to be. So what we run into, though, is networking or a little bit less traditional ways of landing jobs, like what you just described, are the way that people get jobs now. In fact, the job that I just got, I got because I wrote a viral post about my company getting shut down by Paradox.
Oh no! I saw that post.
Yes, I was disgruntled, to say the least. But they actually found me through that post. So LinkedIn and spending some time on LinkedIn and making yourself a bit of a knowledge expert. You don't have to go crazy and become an influencer and all of that, but just making sure you are digitally connected to the industry is a really powerful way to increase your chances of getting a job here. Well, awesome. So now we know, the tale of how Jane landed a job at Super Evil Megacorp, which I think maybe I applied to or something. I swear that name is incredibly familiar.
I think it's just a memorable name, right? Like
maybe
there's not many companies that are that I don't know, humorous or
I
don't know, in your face with the name.
It's kind of a brilliant like game company name. I love it.
There is a backstory to it as well. Like there is a reason. It's quite funny.
Oh, tell us the backstory. Give us the 30-second version.
So there is a podcast with one of the senior leadership team members, Christian, who will explain it better than me. But basically, when they started the company, they knew they were going to make mobile games, and at the time, mobile games were very much seen as like cash grab, like trashy game type.
Are they not seen like that anymore? Or?
Yeah, anyway, the point was that they wanted to just be like really like direct and be like, well, if that's what we're gonna do, let's just call ourselves Super Evil Megacorp because that's what mobile games are like right now. And then it's stuck, and then like it's become like a bit of a theme through everything. So for example, they have a Ministry of Good team within the organization who are like the HR and ops people who are there to balance the evilness.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's kind of hilarious, but I just love saying it to people because it just sounds ridiculous.
I think in some ways I would trust a company called Super Evil Megacorp to like be good more than a company that has some like fancy
any other company.
Yeah, right. Awesome. All right, so why don't we jump into the topic of the day? So we're talking about remote play, managing creativity and collaboration from home. Basically working remotely and then potentially managing a team remotely. It's definitely a bit of a trick, and it's definitely almost emerging area of expertise. People were working remotely before the pandemic, but obviously the levels of remote work have increased like exponentially since the pandemic. So can you give us the 101? We've just entered your classroom, Jane. What does it look like to manage creativity and collaboration from home?
So I've been working remotely for over 10 years now, and I did work in offices at one point, and it just wasn't for me. Like, I wanted to travel, I wanted to have like control over my day. Um, so it's something that I like pushed for right from the start. And obviously, there's been a lot of people who are very critical of it. They don't believe that it can work. They feel like it's inefficient, whatever. And I think I'm just proof that that is all lies because I have still managed to work on amazing projects. I've got promotions, I've got jobs, I've had freelance clients, and it's worked. So if people really want to do that, it is totally possible. There's obviously a lot of benefits for companies as well for remote work. So you can hire more diversely, you can accommodate people who might have disabilities or neurodiversity. You can hire more like globally as well, so you can hire people from anywhere in the world, therefore choosing the most talented people instead of just who happens to be local to your office. One of the main challenges is probably like communication. Like when you're new to remote working, it can be quite difficult to adapt to the communication methods. So one of my tips would be to learn how to communicate well in a written form. So this might look like having documentation of everything. So one of the things that I would recommend is trying tools like Notion, where you can basically make like a total custom intranet setup and you can write instructions of how to do everything within your company. You can have like to-do lists that can be shared amongst the team. So you can have a really clear tracking of like what the status is of a project. And also like being direct with communication. You don't have the luxury of being able to just turn around to a colleague that's sitting next to you and ask for clarity. So trying to get that clarity from the start is really important as well. Like just say what you mean in plain English, like avoid the jargon, like be simple with what needs to be said and like get to the point. Because otherwise like remote work is losing out on the efficiencies. And I really care about being efficient because nobody wants to work more than they should have to, right? And nobody wants to have their life be more complicated than it should be. So by analyzing like the processes that you have in place and the ways that you communicate and trying to spot like ways that you can make improvements there is really important, and even more important when you're remote because like I say, you can't just turn around to someone and ask them. And luckily for us, there's a lot of technology that helps with that, right? Like I've already mentioned Notion, things like Discord or Slack are great as replacements to emails. Like a lot of companies I've worked for don't even send internal emails. They just have Slack threads or they have things on a Jira board or on a Notion page and communications done in that way. So yeah, that's my short version. But if anyone wants me to expand on anything specific, I'd be very happy to.
Amazing. Yeah, if you have questions for Jane as we go, leave them in the chat and hit that Q emoji for me so I can see them. Yeah, it is interesting. I also worked remotely for about 3 years before the pandemic hit, and I've been working remotely since. And I think maybe one of the first things I would say, and I'm curious if you would agree, is it's definitely not for everyone. And I think that's part of the reason that we see, managers and bosses who are trying to force people back into the office. Because what I would hazard a guess for those people is that they are not very good managers for remote workers. They have a hard time managing remote teams. And it's also true for individual contributors. There's people who need to be in the office or just miss it, which is like true of me. I like remote work. I like being able to travel, but I totally miss like shooting a friend with a Nerf gun, halfway through the day or whatever. But I think the first thing for everyone is, if remote work is attractive to you, give it a try. But acknowledge that neither remote or in-house or hybrid are a one-size-fits-all solution. And there's going to be people that it's perfect for, and there's going to be people that it's kind of okay for, and there's going to be people that it's terrible for. That's true of your managers as well, which is why there's all kinds of stupid return to office orders and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. No, I've definitely seen that before. Like, some people just need to be out of the house to focus.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't need to be in a traditional office, right? Like, it can be in a co-working space or in a cafe or at a friend's house. Like, you can create those opportunities that you miss from a traditional office in other ways that also you have more control of. Like, one of my issues with working in offices is being forced into socializing with people that maybe I wouldn't want to socialize with normally. Do you know what I mean? Like, obviously you like some people you work with, but you sometimes get exposed to just like really toxic behavior. Like, especially when I worked in I spent a lot of time working in the fashion industry in London, which is extremely toxic and extremely like party orientated. So there was a lot of pressure on me in my early 20s to like be going out partying every night, because that's just what everyone else at the company was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was obviously really unhealthy from my physical and mental well-being, as well as for my productivity as well. So like, being able to have control over how you socialize and when and how, and is just so much better,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion. Obviously, like, it's not for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are working remotely, you can still do things in person with your colleagues. Like at Super Evil, like, we have people working in like 11 different countries, 100% remote, but people still meet up once a month, like just to go for lunch or to just hang out, because it's helpful sometimes to just like bounce ideas off someone, or you just want to get to know them better. And we also have socials on Zoom calls as well. Like, we have a weekly social where everyone just comes and they just chat. Sometimes it's just like awkward silence. Sometimes people go on like a hour-long rant about how great Warhammer is. You never know what you're going to get.
I'm not exaggerating. I was like, what would I talk about on a social call? And I thought probably Warhammer 40K. And then, and then that's what you said.
It actually happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
I felt like a prescient moment. That's awesome. Yeah, so it's interesting working remotely, because there are that social connection is really, I think, the hardest thing to replace, in my opinion. Are you, Jane? Are you an introvert?
Probably most of the time. Like, I can like, I'm neurodiverse, so like anyone who is can relate to that. Like, I can be extroverted when I want to. Sometimes I get like a bit hyperactive in situations, which is difficult sometimes. But yeah, in general, I would say I'm probably an introvert. Like, I really like doing my work and being able to concentrate. And I do, for me personally, I do that better at home with my dog sat next to me, being able to go and get a cup of tea when I feel like it, and with my desk covered in random anime collectibles. I can't do that in the office.
Can you show us a collectible?
Yeah, so last year I worked with Bandai Namco on the launch of their store in London. And they had Gashapon, so I've got quite a lot of little Gashapons. So I've got Anya from Spy Family here, which clips onto a wire. She's got little hands that clip on a wire, and I've got a Chainsaw Man figure, which is extremely cool. And all other kinds of random stuff, mainly Adventure Time things, but also lots of anime things.
Very, very cool. I think with something I've definitely come to believe is, as with many things that we're discovering in this day and age, social needs are very much a spectrum. I don't think anybody's an introvert versus an extrovert. We all fall on a different part of that spectrum, and we fall on a different part of that spectrum every day. But I agree. I like to choose when I am social, and I like to be able to say no when I don't want to talk to you. Yeah. When the batteries are low. All right. So what I'm a little curious about, so what I heard from you for managing a remote team, I think largely boils down to one big lesson, which is to learn to communicate clearly. And I can definitely agree with that and give that a little bit of sort of backup. I think it's really easy with remote workers to lose a lot of stuff, to lose communication, to lose tasks, to sort of talk about them in one meeting and then they kind of evaporate into nothing, or to just like not get nuance. It's amazing how different two interpretations of the exact same text message can be. Yep. And then a lot of those tools that you gave, working with harder, more specific tools like Notion or like a Monday.com or a Jira, those all help. Instructions, giving people very clear instructions to work remotely also helps. I like to, with my team, record videos. I just do a quick video where I'm like, all right, here's what needs to happen, blah, 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 blah. And then that's it. It's a 5-minute video. Hard to misinterpret that. Avoiding jargon, I like. Written form as much as possible, I like. Having things written down, clear instructions are all good. How about this? What are some of the common problems or challenges that you run into with remote work that you don't think you would run into in person?
I think it's probably something to do with people having different preferences in how they receive information
Mm.
and being adaptable to that. So, like you've just said that sometimes you would record a video for someone. If someone sent that to me, I would hate it.
Crap.
Like, I understand why, but like,
Mhm.
I often watch videos like on social media and stuff with the sound off.
Mm.
So, like, to suddenly have someone talking to me not in a call wouldn't help me. But
Mhm.
that's not because what you're doing is wrong. That's just because my preference is
It's wrong for
to have it
you.
written down. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and when you work in an office, it's sometimes a bit quicker and easier to understand what people's like little quirks are and like what their preferences are. And I know some companies do like tests to figure out what people's preferences are. And I've even seen some companies where they make like a one pager for each individual on the team that lists what's it's like an internal CV, and it says like
Hmm.
if you need to ask me to do something, use these methods. But whatever you do, don't call me unannounced because you'll stress me out or whatever it is. Like
Mm.
they list it. And trying to get that information is really helpful. And obviously, when you can just be direct and just ask people, like, what, how would it, how would you like me to give you this task? Some people will want to go on a Zoom call and just chat about it. Some people want it written down. Some people want a recorded video. And just like learning what works best for everyone on your team and being flexible to that as a manager is important. Like if you're not going to manage people, it doesn't matter as much. But if you are someone who has to delegate tasks or explain a complex principle to someone, like it's your job to figure that out and make a
Hmm.
plan for it. And yeah, so some companies are terrible at it, but if you have the opportunity to put that in place, like do it because it's really helpful and it is good for accessibility as well.
That is a really interesting point. I've made one of the reasons I love doing this podcast is because I learn things to teach my students. And I just made a bit, there's a big star in my journal now that says part of IGA should be teaching people how to work remotely.
Yeah, no, it
um,
should. Nobody gets taught it. Everyone just stumbles into it
yeah.
and just figures it out. But like there is definitely processes and skills that can be taught that would be
Hmm.
helpful.
Yeah, like one of the exercises that you just made me think of that we do already is feedback channels and establishing what feedback channels people prefer. Because receiving feedback is one of the things that can lead to interpersonal failure really consistently. If you have to tell somebody that they are underperforming in some way, it's really easy, of course, for people to get a
Yeah,
little
been there.
defensive and hurt. Yep. And so knowing which way they prefer to get feedback can really help. If they like to get it over text, if they like to talk it out face to face. You know, my older brother I view as kind of a dick, but I love him. And part of the reason that I view him that way is because he prefers to just hash it out. You know, he wants to be told to his face what's going on, and then to talk it out in my opinion, a seemingly almost violent manner. But you know, it works for him. Versus other people really just want to receive it over text and they want to kind of process it in their own, and then maybe come to you and talk to you about it that way. So having those clear feedback channels is really helpful. But what you've made me realize is expanding that to be more just straight up communication doesn't need to be feedback. What are the preferred methods? What are the preferred methods of having meetings, for instance? Do we prefer asynchronous text? Do we prefer those videos? Maybe I need to stop doing those videos, I've learned. In
Sorry.
addition to those feedback channels. Yes. But yeah, like managing the communication, I think, is huge. So here's another question. You're talking about this from the perspective of a manager, which one of my favorite pieces of advice as a manager is that you're the one unblocking your team, which is why it's so important to know these things about your team members. Because if you're doing things like forcing videos upon your team members when it really doesn't work for them, then you are not unblocking your team. You are, in fact, blocking them. I would love to hear, instead, since many of the people in this room are not going to step directly into management, they're just, often getting started. What are some of the pieces of advice that you have for working remotely as an individual contributor and not a manager, as somebody a part of a larger team?
Yes, I think it's still a communication thing, like learning how to write things clearly, and like you have to be more direct than you would be if you're in an office. Like if you need help, you need to just ask for help. Like don't like if you've got a problem in your job and you just leave it for ages, when you're working remotely, nobody's going to notice that you've left it.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to keep people up to date. So if you've got a deadline and you think you're not going to hit it, like you need to tell someone, because nobody's going to like walk past your desk and see that you're not working on the thing that you're supposed to work on. And like being honest can be difficult because like especially if you're junior, because you can worry about like, oh, I'm going to get into trouble or someone's going to think less of me. You need to like get over that a bit and just say what you need to say to get on with it. And in most cases, people will respect you more for being honest and direct than they will if you've just sat silently for 2 weeks and not done anything about the problem. And like being able to identify when something might become a problem is important as well. And hopefully, if you've got a good manager, they have set you clear deadlines and they've set you clear expectations. If they haven't, like this is a really good tip actually. Whenever someone gives you a piece of work, ask them what the deadline is and what their expectations are of that work. Because sometimes a manager will just assume that you know because they're at a senior level where they would just know, and you might not have that information. If you have that information from the start, you can plan your work better and you can be a better remote employee.
I love that. That is a really interesting one. So one of the things that I love doing, and this is something that longtime listeners will have heard 1,000 times, is game jams. No matter where you are in your career, I absolutely love game jams. It's a fantastic way to practice. What I've been doing for myself lately is putting together big old teams. Some people in this room maybe were on one of our last mega jams, because it forces you to learn a lot of the lessons in a sort of high stress way. And one of the things that happened this last time that was fascinating was the definition of done was not well established.
It sounds so stupid, right? It's like, obviously we should know when this is done, but people don't.
Yes. It was wild. Like there were so many moments of, yes, this is done. But what they actually meant was the asset that I was directly responsible for is in the repo somewhere, ? But it's not yet actually plugged into the game and nobody knows who's supposed to implement it. And so, yeah, I mean, that is a very specific example, but I think is a great example where, number one, it was a real weakness on the team, because we started falling behind really hard in implementation because people all sort of assumed like, well, that's somebody else's job. And then two, because that definition wasn't clearly defined, it made communication really confusing for a while until we sort of figured out what was happening. Because there were so many moments of like, yes, this is done, but what I actually mean is the asset that needs to be plugged into the game and tested and like actually has hours of work still is ready. The first version of the asset even is ready.
Yeah.
So yes, clearly defining things such as the definition of what done means. It's very helpful.
Yeah, it sounds ridiculous, but it is true.
Yes. And I love it I love it also from this perspective of the individual contributor. And in particular, I love asking for help. Especially when, I'm not even going to say especially, always, no matter who you are, if you're the CEO of the company, asking for help is good. Always. It is so much better for people to know that you're behind or struggling. and then solving that problem together than it is to like impress people or something that you don't need help. Just ask. It is a real blocker. Like the actual blocker is if people don't know that you're falling behind and the work just stagnates somewhere.
For sure.
100%. All right. It is time for. I've stolen enough of your time, Jane. This has been a great conversation so far. It's time for us to move into community questions. I've pulled Wendy, the Good Witch. Changed her name recently. I love it. Up on stage to ask the first question. Welcome, Wendy.
Awesome.
Hey,
Hello.
hey, how's it going? Yeah, and then my picture is actually Wendy from Peter Pan because I couldn't find a good Wendy the Good Witch one. That anyway, it was a whole thing. All the mods decided to change their names to weird, fun things for Halloween. Okay, I think I'm gonna actually combine my. I had two questions, and if you can, maybe I think they will work together. My first question was productivity hacks, and then my second question was project management tips. So maybe if you wouldn't mind speaking to those together.
Yeah, I can combine those. So one of the things I like to do when I'm starting a new project is to make like a really clear list of like everything that could possibly need to be done. And it seems ridiculous. It seems like overkill sometimes. But seriously, if you do this, you'll save so much time later because I've seen so many situations where like a project will be started and then you think it's nearly done and then someone will be like, "Oh, but what about this?" And then what about this? And then it just stacks up and then like the deadline becomes even more challenging than it should be. So for example, if I'm doing a marketing campaign, I'm going to launch a game, I need a game trailer, right? I also need it in various different formats for different social media channels. I might want a short one and a long one. I might want a banner that's like a really specific size because Epic Game Store has like a different requirement. So like making a list of like all the assets that are needed and all the bits of work and having them like written like normally in a spreadsheet or in Notion or something, like whatever it is the tool that you want to use, and then like assign to each thing on that list like an internal deadline and an external deadline. Having those two deadlines is really helpful because then it gives you some wiggle room for like if any unexpected things happen or if like someone's off sick or something, you're like allowing some extra time. Um, and then that means that whoever's project managing the project or whoever's in charge and just work down that list and just tick things off as they go. And it means that by the end of ticking everything off, your project's ready to go and there's no surprises. Obviously, there is sometimes surprises, but being as prepared as possible is always a good thing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, do you do that? Do you recommend doing that every day? Like, do you make a list every day, or just keep one running list?
No, this is like a big list that you do at the start of a project. So you obviously check it
Okay.
every day to see like, okay, where are we at with this thing that's not done yet? But you do it at the start, really at the start of anything. So if you're just working on one game, you probably don't have to make that list that often. And in fact, once you've done it once, you can just duplicate that same list for the next game or the next project, and it'll be more or less the same. But yeah, it just keeps everything in line. And it's also a good idea to share that list with everyone on your team who's going to be working on it as well, so that if anyone thinks there's something extra or has a problem with a suggested deadline, they have a chance to discuss it right at the start before you get going. So like a common thing that I've seen is that you'll plan a project and you'll put a deadline in, but you won't have realised that, oh, that person's on holiday for 3 weeks in the middle of the project. And you need to know that at the start, right? You don't want to get to them being on holiday and being like, oh no, what do I do? So yeah, it's just about reducing risk basically and making it easier for everyone.
And hoping the people that you share that list with, because I use Teams like this, Microsoft Teams, and so for each project that I have a to-do list, and it's almost always me tagged on everything, but occasionally I'll tackle somebody else, but they a lot of times don't see it. So this is helpful. At least I'm on the right track.
Well, the other tip there that I've got for you is make sure you choose a process and a software that everyone agrees with. Because if you don't have everyone on your team agreeing with the process that you're using, then it's not going to be as effective as it can be. And that can be a challenge in itself. Or if you can get something that everyone agrees with, you'll have a better time.
True. Thank you. This was very helpful. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you, Wendy. Another one that I would throw out there for making that list is just make sure that when you notice things that aren't in the list, you actually write them down. In this, I'm speaking to the individual contributors again, because, like, of course, it's the manager's job to make that list and make sure it's beautiful and upkept. But it's pretty obvious when something is missing. You're like, oh, crap. Yeah, we didn't even think of the, short form version of the video for TikTok or whatever it might be. When you have that moment, just please let your manager know and write it down.
Yep.
That's another one that I feel like happens often. All right. I'm going to ask a question for Misha. Misha asks, regarding this, is it okay to disclose my preferences for accommodation and neurodiverse artists? And should it be done in the beginning of applying to a job?
I've had so many problems with this myself. Like, I'm really conflicted with the answer on this. So, in an ideal world, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, like, there's a lot of assholes out there, right? So, when you disclose a disability or that you're neurodiverse or that you've got a preference of something, some people are going to be biased towards you, sadly, and they're going to judge you before they've even spoken to you. And then that unfortunately falls on the individual to figure out how to get what you need in a less direct way, which is very frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
If you're lucky enough to work in a company that has like policies for that and like are encouraging of it, wonderful. But in my experience, most companies haven't even thought about it. Like, it's not even on the radar that would be a thing. It's getting a little bit better. But yeah, you need to be a bit tactful about how you bring this up and kind of make some judgments based on who you're talking to and how much you trust them. So unfortunately, I would say try and keep it to yourself until you're like within the company and you've got some trust built up. It's very frustrating and it is a shame. But yeah.
Unfortunately, unfortunately, I do agree with you. This is not at all the same thing. But for example, my sister-in-law was pregnant while applying for a job and got the job and then told them that she was pregnant and would need to leave in a couple of months.
Yes, that was the right thing to do too, even though it feels sneaky and mean, but
yeah, it's like maybe a little bit, but like, it's you are deserved of being treated in a way that works for you. And I think it's the same thing for any kind of special requirements or whatever the heck, just accommodations or even just preferences. There's like, I think something that happens in the mind of people who have hired you where now you're on their side or something. And I think they're much more willing and even excited or enthusiastic about helping, the new person really have a great experience that they won't feel if you're just applying. So short answer, I would agree. I think, unfortunately, happens after you get hired. If there's something that like you literally won't be able to work unless they know about, maybe that's sooner than later, but I'm not sure. Awesome. All right. RJ is on stage with our third question. RJ, would you like to hit us with it?
Sure. Yeah, and thanks for taking my question. Quick background. I've unlike Jane and unlike Willem, I haven't been working remote quite as long. I've been working fully remote since 2021. So not like Jane with your 10 years, but I can say though with 3 years of working remote, love it. But like everything, it's not entirely good. It's not entirely bad. And with remote work, as much as I love it, even I acknowledge that there's some cons. There's some issues with it. And one of those issues is I found that in remote teams, there are not all, but there are some team members who, they kind of get into their own little bubble or they feel isolated because it's a fully remote team. So my question to Jane is, what sort of what have you done in the past that could address like a remote team members feeling isolated? Like, did you have any remote team building activities, or what steps did you take to like try to keep the team members feeling like they're a part of a team despite the distance?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's lots of things you can do remotely, and there's also things you can do like in person as well. So remotely, you can obviously still run socials and you can play games remotely with each other. Like one of the companies I used to work in the past would have a monthly games night and would take it in turns to host something. So sometimes we'd play like Among Us, sometimes we'd have a quiz, whatever, like whoever was hosting it could decide. And that was just a really good way to like break the ice and like get to know each other a bit better. If you want to do something simpler, like you can do like what we do at Super Evil, which is that each region of the world has like a weekly half an hour to an hour Zoom call that's booked in. Everyone in that region is invited. It's not essential, but you can turn up if you like, and there's no set agenda. Just chat about whatever's on our minds, and I think that's really helpful because that kind of creates the same environment you would have like whilst getting a coffee in an office or something, right? The other thing you can do is like when you do have meetings is like allow a bit of extra time just to chit chat, because again, like you would do that in an office, so why can't you do that remotely? Like spend the first 5 or 10 minutes just saying like, how are you doing? What did you do at the weekend? What are you doing tonight? What games have you been playing? Whatever it is that you wanna talk about. And then as an individual, I think it's really important as a remote worker to take the opportunity of being a remote worker to have a social life outside of your job. Like you don't have to only socialize with people you work with, right? And I think when you work in an office, it's very easy to fall into just socializing with the people that are directly around you. When you're a remote worker, you've got this great opportunity that you can actually make friends outside of work. And like, so and it can be a bit of a struggle, especially if you're at home a lot. You do have to like create a routine for yourself and like force yourself to do stuff sometimes. So for me, I will go to the local town at least once or twice a week, and we have a bar that we like to go to, and that's where we make our friends. Maybe it's going to a class, maybe it's going to church. I don't know. Have something that makes you go out of the office on a daily basis or a weekly basis, whatever it is that that individual needs. And obviously, as a manager, you can encourage that as well. Like that's why flexible hours is quite common with remote working as well. Like if someone wants to go out and have a 2 hour lunch and then make up the hours later, that's fine. If that's what you need for your mental health and to feel connected to the world, go and do it.
Oh, those are like each of your answers were fantastic. So yeah, thank you, Jane.
No problem.
Awesome.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you, RJ. Yeah, there's I love that one, and there's a couple ones that I would add. I love, by the way, the just having time to chit chat in each meeting. Whenever I always make agendas for my calls because it's easier for me, I guess. And the first line item of every single agenda is say hello. I don't think I really need the reminder.
Written that. Yeah.
But I always, spend that first couple of minutes to chat. A couple things that I've heard from other people to throw in too is having just like an office, just like an office has, having like social groups within your company is great. So you can have like a game night group or a trivia group or a Warhammer group or whatever, still in a remote office, like a little club essentially that people in your company join, especially if you're a bigger company. And that can still be a thing you do, just do it remotely. And having that sort of like thing that you're doing with your office mates that isn't work helps a lot. In-person meetings you have already mentioned, but just to remind people, in-person meetings are great if and when you can make them happen. My team at the Indie Game Academy, we get to meet at GDC and other game dev events multiple times a year, and it's always great to hang out and go get food and whatever. And then, just like finding opportunities to socialize and encouraging that. I love what you say about flexible hours, is always good as well. All right. We've got one more question. I'm going to pull you back up, Wendy, in just a second. But before then, we've got our question of the day, which is where we reiterate one of the most important things we learned. And the first person to answer the question correctly in the chat will get House Cup points. My question is simple this time. What is the one most important thing that Jane recommends for you to do to keep your remote team running smoothly? What do you need to focus on? If you're listening, you can speak it out loud. Wendy nails it with communication. Second message after that in one word, clear. So yes, clear communication. Learn to communicate clearly is really the big bottom line point. Wendy, let us know which house you want to give those points to. I'm going to pull Wendy up on stage as well, because Wendy also has a final question. Would you like to hit us with it, Wendy?
Yeah, hi again. I've been working remotely like 6 years ish, somewhere around there, and try to change things up just to see what works, so it doesn't work, and plus different job, last couple of years. Do you do any type of like online co-working ever, or like where you get together like via Zoom or something with people and you just work and you like maybe share like what your goals are or anything like that?
So in my experience, we do that kind of thing through like scheduled meetings, but I have heard of people who will just hang out on Zoom all day as if they were in an office. To me, that
Hmm.
sounds like a nightmare. Like I would not like that.
Yeah.
But
No.
if that sounds appealing to others, like that is something you can try. Obviously, there is still a lot of collaboration. Even when you're in a remote team, you don't just get given your task and you just do it on your own without any interaction. That's not going to be productive. So obviously we do set up like meetings to like discuss ideas or to like go through a plan. So like for example, I might be working on a strategy for something and I've done all the work on my own and then I'll go and book a meeting for next week with like the key stakeholders just to be like, right, I want to show you this thing that I've worked on. What do you think? What's missing? Stuff like that. So that is a way of co-working.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of companies I work for as well do like quarterly or annual like goal setting, and this can be personal goals or it can be like company goals. So it could be goals to do with like how much engagement you want on social media or how much traffic to the website or how many sales you want to make. So that's a really good practice as well, and obviously it needs to be customized depending on the company and like what it is that you're doing. But yeah, there always has to be collaboration in work, even if it is remote, and there's many different ways to do it. I hope that answers your question, but let me know if it doesn't.
No, it's a good point, and I think I commonly will do I'm given a task and just go do it, and forget that I could reach out to somebody and maybe get a different perspective or whatever. So it's probably something I should keep more in the front of my mind. So yeah, that does. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Wendy. The co-working is interesting. We actually implemented bi-weekly co-working sessions that are about 3 hours long for people that are optional, just can hang out and do your work at IGA. And I will be honest, is anyone on my team listening? I don't know that I like them.
I wouldn't like it. I'd be
'Cause it-
so paranoid. I'd be like, oh my God, I can't cough.
Yeah, it
Can't
just feels like a
drink my
3-hour
water
meeting,
loudly. Yeah,
because
no.
somebody's talking about something the whole time.
I've been in an 8-hour long Zoom meeting once. That was the worst thing I ever did.
Oof,
Remote
yeah,
working. Don't ever do that, guys. Like, it's not worth it.
tough. All right,
Like,
it
have
is now,
2-hour meetings instead.
or just don't. Maybe, I don't know.
Just don't, yeah, have breaks.
All right, we have come to the end of the episode. Before we say goodbye, we like to do two things here, Jane. The first one is to assign some homework. So, what is something that the listeners can do in the next week that'll take them about an hour to practice some of what we talked about here today?
I think probably doing that extensive to-do list thing. Like, set yourself like, doesn't matter what template you want to use. Do it in Notion, do it in a spreadsheet, do it on a Word doc, do it on a piece of paper. It doesn't really matter. But write down a detailed list of like everything you need to do for a specific project. It could be something in your personal life. It doesn't have to be for work. Like, just choose something that you need to get organized on and write it down in a way that if you needed to ask someone else to take over it, that it would make sense. And that's your sense check. Is like, if you weren't able to complete this task, if you could give it to one of your colleagues or your friends, would they understand what you were asking for and the deadlines that you'd given?
I love that. That's a nice, simple, clear one. So your homework is to pick a specific task, a game you're working on perhaps, or if not a game, something a little bit simpler. Write down clear tasks that have to get done, and then information on how somebody else could do them if you weren't the person doing them, but keep it as concise as you can. It's really easy to write out massive paragraphs, but honestly, that's not that helpful because nobody will read them. So keep it concise and make it a nice list. Post this to LinkedIn for us and tag the Indie Game Academy. You can tag me, Willem Delventhal, and you can tag Jane Robinson, and we will comment on your beautiful list. All right, that's going to do it. Before we say goodbye, Jane, do you have any last words of wisdom or anything you'd like to plug here at the end of the episode?
I've had a lovely time. I'd be happy to come back another time if you want me to talk about something else. If anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn and ask me any questions, you can do. I can't guarantee fast replies, but I'll try my best. And then my plug is for the game that I'm working on at the moment, which is part of Steam Next Fest. So I'm working on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate from Super Evil Megacorp. There's a free demo on Steam right now. Really appreciate it if you want to go and play it. Leave us a review. Follow us on social, all that stuff. But yeah, I'm sure you'll have fun with it.
Amazing. Check out the game. We will leave links down below. Check out Jane Robinson. Thank you for being here. Maybe we'll bring you back to talk just straight up marketing one day. Everybody wants to know how to do that better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. That's going to do it for the episode. Thank you, Jane, for being here. It's been a great chat.
Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you to those who asked questions, and thank you, listeners, for listening. As always, if you enjoyed, we ask that you think of just one other person. Who's somebody in your life? Who are the Janes or the Joes of your life that could enjoy this episode, learn something from it? And would you please send this episode along to them for us? We'll see you next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time here in the Discord again. Swing on by, and we'll see you then. Goodbye, everybody. Take care.
Bye.